Relationships matter, especially when you're in the giving space and the nonprofit space and the community building spaces. One of the best things I've heard from a leader that was able to scale to about $400 million when he took over the organization at 70 million was exactly that: is partnerships, is making sure people at the table are of value, not just somebody's friend, not people that really bring something to the table. And me leading this organization, I always tell every board member, everyone wants to bring somebody on, right? What value do they bring? I don't want someone to take up a seat. I need you to actually have passion for what it is that you do, not because you think it's cute. No, that you're in it. So I love that that's what you've kind of embedded from a very start. And then the faith-led business. One of the best things that I've heard another leader say was a faith-led business will teach you more than hustle ever will. And of course, it's teaching you more than hustle ever will, right? And I ask you, what does actually the Christ-like service mean in practice when we're working with foster families and kids in crisis? Because I can imagine that becomes a little bit difficult.
Well, again, we try to start every day in prayer together as a collective whole. Those that are in the office, if somebody's available and they can call in, because we have an agency group chat, that's what we do. We contact each other. We're all in because we're two or three are joined together. There he is. And so we take that time to pray for each other, to pray for the agency, to pray for our homes, the staff, the other organizations that we're working with, even our leaders of our country and stuff, because they directly impact our work in some kind of way, whether they know it or not. And so I think starting with and finishing with is a huge piece, but also making for sure that when we interact with somebody, it's not, oh, you have this lifestyle or you have this lifestyle. God is against that. But walking in a place of love, because I feel like we're going to love more people to Christ than condemn more people to Christ. And so we are always asking our staff, does this home or does this family or this child feel like when they interact with you, this is what it would be like if they were to interact with Jesus? Would they know that the light is there in conversation, in advocacy, in support? If not, then we're doing something wrong.
Where does it all start for you? Having the faith, God, was this early on, mom and dad taking you to church Sunday mornings, Saturday mornings for those that go to church on the Saturdays?
I used to attend church. I mean, go to church, I guess, whatever, as a kid, but that's all it was. I think that it wasn't really a spiritual aspect more than that's where people go when they show up and they wear their hats and so you can dress the fanciest and you better not wear pants because you're a girl. And so that kind of, that turned me off a long time ago on that. But at some point, I have experienced almost any type of abuse that you can think of: homelessness, poverty, all of this different stuff. And somewhere in my teens, because I think I was like 17 when I was home without a home, I was given a Bible. And I remember when we were younger reading just the New Testament with Psalm and Proverbs. And I remember we had dived into it and we were so silly then. But it relit a fire of this is who God is and this is what he's about. And when I felt alone and like I had nobody at all, I was able to see that and know that I had God, that God was there with every tear I cried, with every broken heart, with everything that somebody did to me. He was always there. And it could have been worse. Mm-hmm. And I could not be alive today. And so with that, thank God, I'm going to use all of that to help whoever else needs the help. And I don't know. Like I said, I'm a firm believer in unity. Like we
Yeah.
get so much more done together. God created us not just one person. He created Eve because Adam was alone. And so
Yeah.
with that, we need people. And how much more beautiful and special is it and Christ-like for us to be in unison as one, the true
Mhm.
body of Christ, regardless of what race or any of that we are, one body.
It's really, you mentioned this a little bit earlier as well, is that showing what God has been able to do for you. And I'm in a point right now where that I was adopted. I think we talked about that the first time. And mom had 10 kids. All 10 kids have been stripped away from her. And as I spoke to someone, she had to really put that back into, in light and say, hey, how would you feel if your kids were taken away? I would be broken, right? And a lot of times when people are broken, what do? They go to find a form of substance, right? So here she is. She's been an addict for all these years. She's homeless. And I'm at the space where I help people change the mindset. And it's like, why don't I have that conversation? There's been a lot of resentment, right? Obviously, I'm 35 years old, asking the whys and just never really there. But it's if I can just let her know, kind of what you mentioned, look what God did for me. I understand life happened to you, but that doesn't need to be where you stay. You pick yourself back up. You have worth. You have a purpose. And if you don't believe that God is real, like I don't know what to tell you. And it's not to say that I could physically change her life. But if I can share that story and she can see that one of her 10 kids came back and this is what God was able to do, she has to believe, right?
Yes.
And put the ball in her court for her to sit here and say, like, okay, this is all I needed. I don't know, but I don't want to die with the what ifs. So I hear everything that you're saying, doctor. It's like we really been put through life. And I always say God uses the strong ones because this is not for everybody. I still have brothers and sisters that still kind of, fortunately or unfortunately, kind of stuck in that moment, this happened to me, so everybody needs to kind of bow down to me. And it's like that's not it. Take those things that have hurt you, take those things and fuel them into becoming something better, breaking the cycle. And it is not easy. It's not easy. I remember, doctor, at 30 years old, that's my first time seeking therapy because I just became a parent. But as a parent, I always knew I just needed to break the cycle. I'm going to be there for my kids. And I remember before even having kids, telling my wife, I don't care what happens in our relationship. If we have kids, that we do this together, whether it's in the same home, whether it's separate, but we do this and don't ever, because I understood what that felt like. You know what I mean? I felt that hurt, and I wouldn't want someone to feel that. So we're in a space that it's not about us. It's about the next generation. It's about those that look like us, male or female. And I think that's what's so cool, Dr. Sharilyn, that you're in this space as a Black woman, that you have representation, and it matters. Not a lot of people can say they're in a seat where representation actually makes sense, right? So
Right.
how important is that for you, being not just a woman of color,
Well,
a mom?
it's important for me. I think when I grew up in a predominantly white school slash community overall.
Mm,
And I felt the othered very early. And we've adopted, but before we adopted my biological kids, my biggest thing was I want them to have the best education. Well, I got to
mhm,
take them to this predominantly white area to have the best education. But as my biological youngest got into middle school, she was a different kind of resilient than my others. My other kids, they went through the being called the N word and all of the different things that you go through sometimes in those environments.
mm,
But for her, she was just like, I can't deal with it. It was breaking her. And I found myself at the school every single week about an assignment, about a security guard, about a staff member, asking why she's in America, all of this. And she taught me that It's not about the best education, because if you're mentally not in the headspace, you're not going to get that education anyway. She needed mirrors. She needed people that looked like her. She needed to be surrounded by at least a few adults that look like her, that can say, listen, honey, this is what it's like. This is what it can be like. And so when we adopted the three, we did move areas, but we still ended up in a predominantly white schooling.
Mm-hmm.
But my kids have, and I know how to have those conversations of when you hit middle school, because that's usually where it starts. If you need to move into another district, and since Kansas has open and like enrollment, you let me know, and I'm getting you enrolled in whatever school that floats your boat. As long as you're trying and you're doing your part, I'm okay with pushing and making for sure that my kids have those mirrors, and making for sure that I'm a mirror for those that need me to be one for them, that they can see
Mm-hmm.
that just because you started here, you don't have to stay there. That doesn't get to define who you
Good.
become. And education is one thing that I've learned nobody can take away from me. They can take away
Mm-hmm.
your innocence, your life for that matter, but they cannot take away your education. And so I made it a point to become as educated as I can, and to encourage those behind me to do the same.